Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you the best books that I read in 2022. It makes me really uncomfortable having to decide what rating I want to give something. If you know me in real life or you've been following me for any length of time, you'll know that I am probably the most indecisive person on the planet when it comes to rating books. I hate rating books, so I very rarely rate them online. I will give my opinions online, but I very rarely give a star rating. The only time I really give a book a star rating is when I give it a 5-star, when I'm absolutely convinced that it is one of the best books I've ever read, and I will give it a 5-star. These books are all of the books that I rated 5 stars last year. My least favourite to my most favourite. This is just roughly in the order that I read them throughout the year. We're going to start off with a book that still holds such a dear place in my heart, and that is Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. I received this for my birthday last year. My birthday's in February, so I read this almost an entire year ago, and this book still means so much to me. I'm obsessed with Karu as a character. I think she is just one of my favourite characters I've ever read. She was the big inspiration behind me having blue hair for a significant period of last year. I had bright blue hair, mainly because of Karu. I think she is one of my favourite characters I've ever read before. Her reactions to things, the way that she thinks, her relationships with other people, her emotions, just everything about her is just magical, and I'm obsessed with this book. I have yet to read books 2 and 3, purely because I'm a little bit nervous that they won't live up to the hype that I have for this first book. But I will definitely be reading them, and hopefully reading them soon. But I do need to read Laini Taylor's other books because I have yet to read those. So yes, it did make me want to read them, and I will read them soon, but 100% this is one of my favourite books of all time now. Next, I have a book which is a collection of poetry and kind of like short stories. That is Fierce Fairy Tales by Nikita Gill. There are a couple of Nikita Gill books on this list because Nikita Gill is one of my favourite poets. Well, she is my favourite poet and one of my favourite writers ever. She is fantastic. I met her at YALC and it was one of the best reader experiences of my entire life. It was just amazing to actually meet her in person and talk about poetry, and she gave me some really amazing advice. So that in itself makes anything by her very special to me. But this one I really enjoyed because it is retellings of classic fairy tales, but with very unique twists. I don't want to give a lot. It's really hard to do because they're poems, they're quite short. It's really hard to talk about them in any detail without spoiling you, and I really think it's better to not know what you're going to read before you read it when it comes to this collection. But I will just say the Peter Pan one destroyed me, and I will never be the same. I will never be the same person since reading that, and I can't recommend this highly enough. Then we have a YA fantasy, and this is another one that I bought for YALC and brought to YALC and got signed, and it's one that I just think anything around YALC has such a special place in my heart. You guys know that YALC is just one of my favourite things to ever exist. I love it. I'm obsessed. And the fact that I got this book signed and the sequel signed is just very exciting to me. But that's Beasts of Prey by Iona Gray. This is one of the most atmospheric books I have ever read in my life. When I tell you that thinking about this book, I can almost smell the plants. I can hear the sounds of the birds and the animals and just the nature around. It's phenomenal. The way that Iona Gray writes setting is unlike anything I've ever read before. The characters are phenomenal. I love them. Just such special characters, and the way that they interact with each other, the way that their relationship and their dynamic changes throughout the story, the plot twists, just everything about this is fantastic. And if you have not read Beasts of Prey yet, I highly recommend that you do. The concept that this is her debut novel blows my it blows my mind. The fact that this is the first book that she published, that she released, is just mind-boggling to me because it's just that amazing, and I can't. If you've not read it, go read it and then come back and tell me what you think, because this is one of my favourite books ever and I love it. Then we have another book that I got around YALC time, one that I got signed and I'm very excited to have a signed copy of, and that is Scythe by Neil Shusterman. I had not read this until I was preparing to go to YALC, and I remember when this came out and everybody was obsessed with it and it was the biggest thing, and I was like, I don't really like dystopian, I don't really like futuristic, kind of dark-ish twisted novels. It just wasn't what I was reading at the time. I wanted like high fantasy, and that was all I wanted to read when this came out. But I read this last year just before I went to Yalk, and again, it blew my mind. I don't know if I just didn't really know what to expect, or I don't know. I kind of, if there's a really popular book that I feel like I will at some point want to read, but I'm just not in the mood at the time, I will try and avoid spoilers as much as I can, or just avoid anything about it. Like, all I really knew about this book was that it was a world where nobody died and these people went and they were the ones who killed people. That's literally all I knew. And the depth of conversation about death and, you know, what it means to be in a society where people don't die in this futuristic world is just, for a YA novel, it's immense, and I really enjoyed this one. I also want to just point out that Neil Schusterman is one of the nicest authors I've ever met. So at Yalk, if you've not been, Yalk is a book convention, the young adult literature convention that happens in London, and obviously we haven't had one in a few years up until last year because of COVID. They all got cancelled or postponed, and Neil Schusterman was I would say one of the bigger names that was at Yalk last year. And when you go to a signing, you get a little ticket, and that's your number in the queue, and then they call sections of the queue to come up at a time, so it's not like the entire queue at once, because it's insane. And for pretty much every other author, they stuck to that. And, you know, if they were only calling 1 to 20 and you were 23, you know, come back. Like, you couldn't just, like, get in the queue. But for some reason, for Neil Schusterman's line, they just let everybody line up. Like, just, there was, you know, 100, 200, probably more people all queuing up at once, and it was insane. But everybody was talking about the books, everyone was bonding over their love of Scythe and just Neil Schusterman's writing and everything. But one of the things that I found really sweet was that most authors, if they had a queue that big, and this isn't a criticism to other authors, it just is how it is, they would sign it, say hello, have a quick chat, and then you go. Neil Schusterman took his time. He was just having none of this like, oh, I need to be quick. No. He spent a solid amount of time with every single person that went up to him in that queue, and I got all 3 books signed, which again, normally they're just, if it was a queue that big and an author that popular, you just get 1 book signed, and that is how it is. But for whatever reason, Neil Schusterman was, no, he's going to sign each one. And not only did he sign each one, he wrote a message in each one, and he did it with the matching colour pen. So this one is red, this one is blue, and this one is green pen. And I love when an author is that dedicated and that extra in their signing. It was fantastic, and he was so lovely, and it's such a good conversation with each reader in that queue. I know other people who were queuing up, and they said that they felt the same way, that he really took the time to find out why you enjoyed the books, or if you haven't read each of them, why you were looking forward to the other ones. It was just a really good experience. But that is not, I've just realised I've gone off on a massive tangent, but basically I really enjoyed Scythe. I didn't really know what to expect going into it because I deliberately kept myself in the dark a bit for this one, so I didn't know too much before I went into it. But I really enjoyed it. I had a great time with this one, and I'm very excited to finally continue on with the rest of the trilogy and see what the next 2 books are like. I'm going to try not to go off on quite so many tangents with the next few books, because this is going to be a very long video if I do. And I've completely lost track of what order I was reading these books in, but I'm going to give it a go of sticking in time. Again, before Yalk, I read The Girl and the Goddess, another book by Nikita Gill. This is a novel in verse, so it's poems, but it is a novel. It tells an overarching story. This book, I don't actually have the words to explain to you how incredible this book is. I mean, there are hardly any tabs in this. I really want to reread this and retab it. I kind of want to get another edition of it so I can like super annotate it and like underline and highlight and write notes in it, because this book is incredible. The emotional and physical journey that the main character goes on throughout the story is unlike anything I've ever read before. The main character, Paro, goes through some really intense and difficult things in her life, and the way that Nikita Gill writes it is just so beautiful. I mean, I felt so connected to Paro. I felt like she was a real person that I knew and that I was talking to, and hearing her story from in her own words. It was just incredible. And I mean, I cried so hard through this book. I read it in about 2-3 hours. I read it pretty much in one sitting, and I just cannot even explain to you how much this story impacted me. And one of my favourite aspects of this story is that it heavily involves deities and religion, but in such a unique way, and it's just fascinating. And the ending of this book, I don't actually know how to explain to you how magical this is, and it's unlike anything I've ever read before. I don't think I'll ever read anything quite like it. It is just one of the most unique things I've ever read in my entire life, and if you are somebody that needs something that will make you think but also give you hope and make you see the world in a completely different way, this book is one that I think everyone should read, and I will never stop singing this book's praises. It's incredible. Next we have two books by my favourite author of all time, who, if you have been following me, you will know exactly who this is, but it's Adrienne Young. So this is Namesake, which is the sequel to Fable. I've been waiting to read this for so long. I have a really hard time reading Adrienne's books when they come out. Sounds really stupid because she's my favourite author and I love her work so much, but the idea of not having an Adrienne Young book on my shelf that I have not yet read that I can look forward to is so sad that I find it really hard to pick them up, because I don't want to have read everything she's already released and then have nothing new to read by her. But I do really want to reread all of her books this year, so I'm going to be reading Saint ASAP, so look forward to that. Fable is a book that absolutely destroyed me emotionally, and it's one that I will recommend to anybody who likes YA, anybody that likes fantasy, anybody who likes books with magic and romance and dodgy family. Yeah, it's amazing. There's so many good things about that book, but this is the sequel, and I had some concerns that nothing was going to compare to book one, but this book was amazing. The ending had me shook. I mean, I have no words, but basically, I mean, I can explain to you if you can see them at all. So the blue tabs were for moments or scenes involving Fable's dad, Saint, and the ending, I ran out of blue tabs and I literally screamed because I didn't want to have to put the book down to go and get more blue tabs, but I needed the blue tabs to tab about her dad. So it was, this book, phenomenal. I can't wait to reread it. Amazing. And then I was lucky enough to be invited to one of the best things that has ever happened to me in my existence, and it was one of the highlights of my life, to be honest. Not just 2022, it was one of the highlights of my actual life. But I was invited to a blogger event for Adrienne's adult debut, which is Spells for Forgetting. So I have a signed edition, which is on my shelf looking pretty, just to be looked at. And then I have this edition, which is the one that I highlighted, annotated, tabbed, and just loved, basically. This is one of my favourite books of all time. It's definitely my favourite adult mystery of all time. This book is phenomenal. The magic system in it, and it is a adult mystery. The suspects, but also the best friend, and the relationship between all of these people. It flips forward and backwards in time, so you see them as children when they were friends, you see them as adults now after the death has occurred, which a lot of people believe is a murder, but nobody really knows. You get to see the relationship develop between the main characters, Emery and August. It's just amazing. And there's also that Adrienne classic witchcraft / magical element to it. This book is fantastic, and I have been recommending this to pretty much everybody I know. So if you've not read this and you like mysteries and you like witchy things, this is the perfect book for you. And also, it's stunning. So yeah. But yeah, I was lucky enough to go to the event and meet Adrienne properly and have like a big old chat with her, and it was just one of the highlights of my absolute life. So yeah. The next one I have is a book that I have read multiple times a year for the last 4 years, and that's The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse by Charlie Mackesy. I haven't got the new animated special edition one that they made for the movie that came out, and I haven't seen the movie yet, but this is one of my favourite books. Obviously this is the original edition. I've read this so many times that this book is pretty much falling apart at this point, so I probably should get another edition of it. But I got this for Christmas a few years ago from my auntie and uncle, and I have read this so many times. I actually bought my auntie the new animated special edition version of it so that she can have a copy, because this book means so much to me, and if I'm ever feeling a little bit low or I just need something that's hopeful and uplifting, I will pick this up and feel immediately better. If you need a book that is uplifting and hopeful, this is the perfect one for you. We only have 3 more books left to talk about, which is kind of shocking, but as I said, I don't really rate many books 5 stars, so it kind of makes sense. But the next one is my most recent read of last year, and that is Sad Ghost Club 2. This is another one, so Sad Ghost Club 1 is a graphic novel that I read all of the time, and I read it kind of for the same reasons that I read The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse. But I finally picked up Sad Ghost Club 2, and I think I actually enjoyed this more than I enjoyed Volume 1, which I didn't think was going to be possible, but I really love the fact that you get to see the effects that the anxiety and depression that they talk about in the first volume can have on the other people in your life, as well as yourself. If you're somebody that deals with anxiety and depression, I think this series is fantastic because it deals with it in a very real way. There's no sugarcoating, there's no kind of making it seem less than it is. It's very real, but it does it in such a personal and such a well-written way. I just think, I don't even know how to explain it, but it's just so well done that it's not overwhelming, it's very real. At least in my own experience, it feels very real. I'm curious, if you've read this and you also deal with anxiety and depression and things, let me know if you agree with me that this is a very realistic representation of what it's like to interact with others. I'm interested to know if other people feel the same way. The next one I'm going to tell you is the only contemporary on this list, but this is a contemporary romance, and you guys are probably, I don't read contemporary romances, but I read XOXO by XOXO. Finally, I've had it on my TBR for such a long time, and this is a K-pop romance. If you didn't know, the main character meets this guy in a karaoke bar that's owned by her uncle, and then she moves to Korea to stay with her or visit her her gran, who's not very well. And it turns out that the guy she met in the karaoke bar is actually a K-pop star. And that's all you really need to know, but this book was just fantastic. The romance was so sweet, but there were so many layers to it. There's so many layers to the story and the main character and her hopes and dreams, and also the way that her family expected her to behave, but also wanted her to achieve her own goals and dreams, her relationship with her mum. I really enjoyed this. I wasn't expecting it to be as good as it was, but this was one of my favourite books and I really enjoyed this. As I said, I don't read a lot of contemporary romances, but this made me want to read more, so yes, I would highly recommend this if you like K-pop and romance. Okay, so we're on to the last book of this list, and I think it's very fitting that I kept this one till last because it's one of my most recent 5-star reads, but also one of the ones that I love talking about the most. It is The Ballad of Never After by Stephanie Garber. This is actually the signed exclusive edition that I got as my Secret Santa gift from work, which was amazing. I was so happy when I saw this. But yeah, so I have a signed edition, one of my favourite books ever, which is very exciting. But this is the sequel to Once Upon a Broken Dream, and it's by the same author that wrote Caraval. I have read Caraval, but I've not read the other two, so I need to get to those this year, hopefully. I think I just said Broken Dream. I read Once Upon a Broken Heart last year when I was in a reading slump, and it got me out of my reading slump and reignited my love of fantasy. I picked this up a couple of months ago and I read this in like 2 days, which for me is quite quick really, and I flew through this and I did literally any second that I was not working, I was like immediately stuck in this book, devouring it, and it was amazing. I do have a clip on my TikTok of me finishing this book, like reading the ending and just crying, and like I was in the living room and I was like, oh, this is gonna make me cry, so I'm gonna like film my reaction. And my mum came into the living room and was like, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, why are you just sitting here crying? And I was like, this book, it's destroying me. I am obsessed with this. I cannot wait for book 3. We have until September. I'm pretty sure it's September that it comes out, and that seems so far away, but I cannot wait to read book 3. I'm obsessed with this series. I cannot get enough of it. I really want to reread these. I don't reread books often, but I really feel like this is one, well, Once Upon a Broken Heart and then Ballad of Never After. are 2 books that I really want to reread, so I can definitely see myself rereading these. Okay, so that is every book that I rated 5 stars in 2022. Let me know in the comments what books you guys rated 5 stars in 2022, or your favourite books of 2022, and let me know if you've read any of these books and if you have any recommendations based on these that you think I would like. I really want to do a reading vlog where I ask you guys to recommend books to me and then I read them and show you my reaction. So if you have any recommendations, let me know. But thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe if you want to see future videos from me. I have a lot of videos planned and I'm really excited to get back into BookTube and posting here more regularly. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching and you'll see me soon.